Disable the waiting room. Hi everyone, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. We thought we'd better start on time. We did get quite a lot of registrations in, but I'm sure there'll be some late comers. But we just want to keep to time because these wonderful speakers are obviously, giving of their time for us tonight. Well, thank you for joining us and it's great to see you all. My name's Steph and I work in the community engagement team here at Hireup. Now, before we begin, I just want to let you know that if you would like to enable live transcript, you can do so by pressing the live transcript button or the CC button below in your Zoom bar. And we will also be recording this session for those who couldn't attend today. So I just want to begin like we do all of our Hireup sessions by acknowledging the people and land on which I'm hosting this event from today, the camera past and present, and I'd like to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. If you'd like to share which land you're zooming in from, please do so in the chat. We really want you to, be as, open on the chat as you like. Let us know from what state you're zooming in from. And obviously, if you have any questions for our panel speakers throughout this 1 hour, then we'd be happy for you to write them in the chat and we'll get to them. So for those of you who have not heard of Hireup before, we are Australia's largest NDIS platform for people living with a disability and their families to find, hire and manage their very own support workers who fit their needs and their common interests. Tonight, we're really excited to have partnered with Autism Awareness Australia to be able to share some great information and resources for those seeking some insight and understanding on navigating an autism diagnosis. Like we've got a great panel lined up to speak about a recently launched website called Autism, What Next?, which gives everyone or anyone seeking more information about early or first diagnosis of autism the right information. And so to help answer your questions and share more about the website, please let me welcome our panel members here today for us. First of all, we have Nicole Rogerson. Nicole is one of the nation's leading spokespersons for the awareness and understanding of autism. She is the founding director of Autism Awareness Australia and is an experienced director, government advisor and senior executive. For more than 18 years, she has been advising on public policy, providing early intervention services and advocating for the inclusion, acceptance and understanding of individuals with autism. She's deeply committed to improving the lives of individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. And Nicole has 2 sons, the eldest of whom is on the autism spectrum. Welcome, Nicole. Barb Cook. Barb is a registered developmental educator, deputy chair of the Developmental Educators Australia Incorporated, and an autism and neurodiversity employment consultant and life coach for neurodivergent adults. Barb identifies as neurodivergent, being diagnosed midlife with autism, ADHD and dyslexia in 2009, and promotes a strength-based and person-centered approach in her life and work. And lastly, Dr. James Best. James lives and works on the beautiful south coast of New South Wales with his wife and youngest son, Sam. Sam was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder age 3 in 2004. James has been a general practitioner for over 25 years, and his medical practice has a special focus on child development, child behaviour, parenting and children with disabilities. He's been widely published in medical and mainstream publications on these and other child health topics. And in 2015, Sam and James travelled for 6 months through Africa to help Sam develop life skills, an adventure that was featured on Australian Story in 2017 and also documented in James' book, Sam's Best Shot, published by Allen and Unwin. So welcome to all our panel speakers today. And I just want to remind everyone, if you would like to ask a question throughout this event, you can either feel free to unmute yourselves. We're very happy to be a little bit casual here. It's a bit of a conversation and we want you to be involved as much as possible. If you don't want to do that, feel free to write your question in the chat and we will definitely get to it. So I thought I would just kick it off. First off with you, Nicole. Can you just explain to our audience what they can expect to find on the website Autism What's Next and why this information is so necessary in this time?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Steph, for having us, and hello, everybody. And after those introductions, I just think we sound really old. Like fundamentally, that was my takeaway. That was so middle age of all this. Anyway,
experienced, but you know,
shake off the depression for a minute. Probably more than anything, I think the best way to describe it is the why before what they're going to find, and the why is a big why. So, obviously, I'm a parent, as is James, of a child with autism. So for us, when our children were diagnosed, my son's now 25. Don't do the math. I had him when I was in kindergarten. So it was just a miracle. So that's how young I am. But go back into 1999 and we had limited internet. We didn't have any Google. We had Yahoo groups and a terrible search engine called Look Smart or something. With internet was dodgy, right? Mm-hmm. So you would get a diagnosis for your child and told, good luck with that. Off you go. See what happens. And of course, you're left to your own devices. Now, imagine, this is 20 something years later, the internet is blown up even further. So now you have access to lots of information about autism, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good information. So to use an analogy that I guess James uses a lot, which is, if you have a medical condition and you're diagnosed with it, there's immediately an action plan of what to do. And that's just not true with autism. And so my experience was in 1999, but cut to, the 2020s, and the experience isn't vastly different. It still is leaving parents and families up to Dr. Google. So we really wanted to address that. How could we find a way to make the path easier for parents? And during that process of thinking about that, we were starting to think, well, hang on a second, there's this other whole section of people who get diagnosed with autism as adults. So this is not my community. My community is full of parents of little kids or young people. But hang on, there's all these people that find out they've got autism later in life. And when we started to talk to that community, and fabulously with people like Barb, we were like, guess what? They're equally as lost as everybody else. Mm-hmm. So that's when we decided that the resource was more important to make a pathway for both of those audiences. So they're really different ages, different experiences, but same, I'm lost in Google. How do I find the way? So what you will find, to answer your question finally, what you will find is our answer of, okay, we've gone through everything. We've spoken to everyone. We've asked all the biggest brains around the world, and this is your best next bit of information that you need. So I hope you find really simple, clear pathways to start getting you the support that you need, because everybody's experience is so different with autism. So just getting the help that you need right now. So that was the idea behind it, and hopefully that's what you'll find when you get there.
Can I ask, just in follow-up to that, what have been some of those really common misconceptions sometimes that people do come across Dr. Google and it's just completely kind of wrong?
Well, in my experience with very little children, because I've worked in early intervention for many years, it goes both ways. You could find either parents who get the answers that they need and they immediately start being able to get the right supports for their child. But likewise, if you're a bit vulnerable, if you're a parent on your own, or you don't have great family support, you might all of a sudden read an email or read a website that tells you something like, my child was cured of autism, which is a dodgy response anyway, by taking a particular vitamin at 5:00 in the afternoon at this latitude and longitude, and it'll all be fine. So people get taken by pseudoscience and nonsense and therapies that don't work and that they don't help children. And that sometimes therapies that don't hurt children, but they might be an absolute waste of time and quite a bit of pressure on your budget. So what we wanted to do was to be able to give an evidence-based response to people, which is, these are all the really sensible things you can do. You don't have to do them all at the one time. You shouldn't do them all at the one time. But these are all of the best pathways to go. Really, essentially what we were designing is what Nicole, mum to Jack, really needed in 1999. And I suspect there's been lots of Nicole's mums to Jacks and lots of Barb's who really needed the support and guidance. And by co-designing this with parents, with individuals with autism and with clinicians, it was just this brains trust of, let's get everybody's experiences in there and design for that. And I hope that's what we've done.
Absolutely. Well, going into sort of the content of the website, as you mentioned, all of those co-designers, which is really amazing. Barb and James were both major contributors to the information and content for this site. And I thought it might be good for you both to maybe give a bit of an overview. There are sort of three areas that the site focuses on, sort of an autism pathway that maybe one of you could explain, but then also autism in children, which it sort of, I guess, is more you, James, and then autism in adults. So we might, if possible, start with James. Like Nicole, you've had lived experience as a parent whose child has been diagnosed with autism. Like, what can parents listening to this Zoom expect from those resources? Like, can we get into some of the detail of what they might find?
Sure. Thank you, Steph, and thank you everybody for turning up and having a listen to us. Personally, I'd like to say, after what Nicole mentioned, is just how good it is to have this resource available. It's great. It's really filling a hole, a big hole that I've been dealing with for probably about 20 years. In that there is this space, and I was the same, even though I was a doctor, and that I've sort of felt, I don't know anything about this when the diagnosis landed, and I had to go and do my own Google search, as did my wife as well, and so it is really very much a starting point from being disorientated, and I think that's really what this resource is designed to disorientate. I think it's actually quite analogous to what's happening with COVID at the moment. That you have a population where this unknown thing happens, whether you're talking about the disease or the vaccine, and people get stressed and distressed, and they just don't. They have trouble processing it all, and sometimes they're very vulnerable in this particular situation, and they can be diverted into all sorts of different directions. When Nicole was saying about how different people pick up on different things, there are 1,000 different ways that people can be misdirected when they get an autism diagnosis, and I still get astonished after all these years about some of the things that people will be some pathways that people will be led down. So I think that the fact that it has been developed in this methodical way with the right people advising the development, and they've got lots of people involved and lots of really good, highly qualified people. And also it's presented brilliantly. So it's just really clear and laid out, and it's organised and it's professional. And so I think it's really much an orientation tool, because I have been watching families go through this for so long, and sometimes they come to me after they've been through other bits and other pathways and other directions, and maybe got advice that was unhelpful, and they may have been burnt already. Or sometimes they're completely new to it all. So I think wherever you're coming in, at whatever point, and even like Nicole mentioned about Barb and her community of adults with autism, that they come in at a different point. And so whatever entry point you're coming in, you still need a certain reliable resource to help guide you through what does this mean and what should I do about it. So I suppose that's kind of what it's designed to do.
And has it been taken up quite well? I know it's only just launched very recently, but by general practitioners, allied health partners, and so forth, or is it still sort of, I know this is just the beginning of the promotion of it. How has that community taken it up so far?
Nicole?
Well, I'm just going to brag first.
Yeah, go for it.
Say, well, it's really been amazing. No, it really has. We launched it 3 weeks ago, and we've had over 8,000 visitors, and we've hardly started any genuine marketing about it. It was just, and it's not like we're selling tickets to something. This is a free digital tool. Come whenever you need it. Send your friends and relatives whenever they need it. This is just something that I really hope is going to build over time. The reception to it has been just astonishing. We are absolutely delighted, but I think the reception to it, not that I don't think it's good, we produced it, but I think the reception to it has been really good because there's nothing else out there. Yep. There isn't necessarily a really good go-to guide for everything, particularly including adults like Barb, because, that's a community that was really separate to us. James and I belong in this parent world. And then when we met Barb and all of the autistic adults who contributed, we were like, this is brilliant. We can include everybody's views in this because everybody's equally as mixed. So I'll shut up and let Barb talk, but about her experience with it.
That's a good segue into Barb. I mean, I wanted to ask you, you were obviously diagnosed with autism as an adult, and I'd just love to ask you sort of two questions. The first one, would you be open to sort of sharing a bit more about your personal experience with this diagnosis as an adult? Because it's true, you don't really hear about sort of it being diagnosed when you're much older. And the second question is, for those adults watching this Zoom who have been thinking about their own situations, what information did you make sure you wanted to add to the website so that, you know, maybe you didn't have access to when you were trying to understand and navigate your own diagnosis?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to share about my journey and experiences learning about myself and finding a diagnosis, and actually learning about autism, because I never even knew what that was until I did some research actually from my partner. And that was by accident, just looking for particular things, going, yes, he was different and quirky, and he's also an adult. We were both early 40s. I was just before 40, he was 41. And looking at what there was out there as in the terms of traits and things like that, and I'm looking, going, wow, okay, what is this? It's back then in 2009, it was Asperger's syndrome. And I'm like, wow, I've never ever heard of this. I had a misconception of what autism was. It was, for me, it was something that was with children and was predominantly with boys. And they're still quite often still very much stereotyped that way because of how research was designed. And when I was looking through the criteria, I'm thinking to myself, that's me as well. And there was very little literature to learn about myself as an adult, especially as a woman. And there was very little experiences. There was a couple that I found that were from Leanne Holiday-Wiley, and there was another book that I read, and reading about their personal experiences and about what they went through gives some validation to me that other people were struggling and other people had these challenges and differences and felt alien to everybody else around them. So through my childhood and through in my adulthood years, I often found it very difficult to connect with people and understand what other people were doing. When I was younger, I was a girl I never spoke to anybody because I never knew what conversations were about. I never understood what are people doing? How do they do this backwards and forth? And by the time I try and figure out what they were doing, the conversation had moved on. And I could not just understand. So I lived in this little bubble of myself. I never said anything to anyone. And somebody said to my mum when I was about 12 years old, does she actually speak? So she does, but when it's something that she actually knows. But apart from that, I would never say boo to anybody because I didn't understand. And so going through this process, I often thought to myself there was something really wrong with me, because preconceptions were you have depression, you have anxiety, you have a mood disorder, you have a personality disorder. There's lots and lots of people will get misdiagnosed throughout their lifetime until they get to adulthood, and especially for women, because we're very, very good at masking and hiding our traits. So we fly under this radar, and it's not until we get much older, and it's usually often after masking and camouflaging and pretending to be everybody else to fit in, that we have this breakdown and we get to a point of burnout, that we start to explore and understand what's going on. It's obviously, there is so much more to these other diagnoses that we'd had in the past. So these diagnoses we've had is based on that external presentation that people quite often look at. Oh, you have anxiety. These are different things that are going. You're depressed, so we're going to treat you with this. We'll give you medication for this. But they're never looking at that particular source of what's going on. And so with this website and with Autism What Next, especially with Nicole and bringing this together, looking at, yes, from a parent perspective and from children's perspective, having the opportunity as an adult to be able to explore and look at what this looks like, especially when it's looking at later life diagnosis, it's a good opportunity to be able to put that information out there and go, this is what I've seen, this is what other adults experience, and this is some of the things that you can look at and start exploring. This may be thinking to yourself, going, this is how I look at my life, this is how I am in the workplace, this is how I am with my relationships, or my friendships, and start exploring what's happened in the past. And so this helps you build up and learn information. This website is incredibly important because there's lots and lots of sections in there that look at every single part of your life, and you can bring this all together. And then you can go off to your GP and educate your GP, because this is something I found very difficult when in adults. Hey, I have autism. Or I have Asperger's syndrome. No, you don't. Children have that. Adults don't have that. Well, yes, we do grow up, and it doesn't go away. We just learn how to hide it, or we try to do things differently. So it's really good to be able to get this information out there as an adult and help educate not just ourselves and also adults, but also educate that wider whole community, especially including professionals and educators, pretty much everybody that's out there. And James, you would definitely know this from your own experience as a GP, as you were saying before, learning even from yourself, from your own family.
I came from that low base myself, and what I absolutely hear what you're saying, Barb, because I see this all the time, and I talk to other doctors and try and educate them about this, because there's, when you get an autism diagnosis, or your child gets an autism diagnosis, or you're thinking about it, you'll probably within a couple of hours know way more about autism than any GP in Australia is going to know, because you're going to spend hours and hours and hours looking at it on the internet, and so that is usually the experience when someone comes in. It's not usually, I think you might have a problem here, we need to do this. It's more that they come in with something, and so I sort of see autism as being like if you thought of a giant room with lots and lots and lots of doors. If that room was autism, and you had a giant room with lots and lots of doors that people can walk through lots of different doors to get in there, and the website is set up like that. Is it it's designed for when you log on, you sort of see it sort of tries to figure out which door you're coming through, so it can help you best. But you know that inside that room it's safe, because it's got the right people, it's got the right information, and that's been checked and checked and checked by lots and lots of very important people, and so that's why I was talking to Nicole about this another time, where what I hope for this website is for it to become the medical home of autism. Okay, that is every in all areas of medicine there should be a home that you go there when that's the problem, that's where you go, that's where you get reliable stuff. Yeah. Like, if it's diabetes, it's Diabetes Australia. If it's rheumatoid arthritis, it's the Arthritis Foundation. There's always a place that you get all your information. The Cancer Society. So all of these different things. So this is what I think this is building, and so I'm not surprised it's taking off, and I think it'll take off a lot more. So
the GP thing that I think is really important, and I see somebody asked a question in the chat.
Yes.
Is, and one of the things, thank you to the person who asked the question, but my goodness, it's such a common experience, right?
Totally.
Of people's GPs, they did it to Barb, they did it to all of us. I remember my GP at the time, who's since been gathered, but my God, I'm never going to forget it, who kind of implied that I was a tad neurotic. And that was kind of Jack's only issue, is his mother. So what I think was really interesting, and what we did in the design of Autism What Next, is we got James and other doctors to say, I said, well, what happens? Parents go to these GPs and they trust them, and they ask the GP what's going on, and the GP says, yeah, nah, probably nothing. Come back in 6 to 12 months. That is a massive amount of lost time in the development of a young child. So James and some of our other professionals that were involved in particularly the videos that come with Autism What Next did this great job of just training parents in the videos of how to say to the GP, yeah, nah, that's not good enough. That's not an answer. I need a referral to somebody who knows more about what. No fault to the GP that you're not an expert in autism, but don't stop me from investigating the mother gut that I've got, that something's going on, and Barb's describing it, and there's something going on, I need to investigate it for herself. You're allowed to push back on your GP. So some of these videos are actually training people how to be agitators, but or just, how to nicely push back and ask for more help.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, exactly. Oh, sorry, James. We know how we are with conversations. We've got lots and lots to talk about. I just want to follow on with what Nick was saying, because this is something of very early conversations we had before we even started writing content. We discussed what is the primary objective in the terms of getting this information out, and it was that focus of GPs are the people that, in some sense, are gatekeepers for us to be able to get referred to get a diagnosis or to get support. If a GP goes, no, I don't think this, we can't go any further usually from that. So we need to be able to help educate from that first port of call, go, hey, this is what we have, look at this, And you usually find with an autistic person, we will have researched it to the nth degree, and we will have so much information going, here it is. That's actually a really good indicator, because if we can detail every single thing here, okay, there's something going on here, and then get referred to the right places where a psychologist or a psychiatrist that can then explore more, go through the assessment, and then we can actually get the knowledge. Even if it doesn't end up being an autism diagnosis in the end, you're actually going to get support anyway in learning and supporting yourself. So this is a really good way of looking at this as well.
Yep. So, and I guess part and parcel as well of this website is for everyone here, if they are going through this, you could educate your GP through giving them this website as well. I just wanted to read this out because Z has shared, you know, similar to what you, Nicole and James have said, 3 GPs and an ENT specialist said, I was crazy 5 years ago when I suspected my son had autism, lots of Google search. I diagnosed my son. Finally, a good GP and pediatrician took me seriously and formally diagnosed my son just before the age of 2. Many till today are still struggling to get a diagnosis. So that mother instinct, she says, follow your mother instinct. She does ask a question. She says, many have given me a different response to this. And obviously, thank you, Z, for sharing your experience. Is autism genetic or environmental?
Okay, now I know James is the doctor, so to be fair, the question should go to him, and I'm qualified in nothing. I will only tell you this in my somewhat 20-something experience, years of experience in autism, is that oftentimes in our early intervention programs, we would have lots of brothers and sisters and lots of cousins and lots of family units. So I'll let James speak to the actual science, but there's undeniably, it's recognised, is a genetic component does play a role. Now, James, do the nerd sort of answer to that.
Which I'm very good at being the nerd. Definitely genetics is involved. Now, to what degree and to which genes? And people talk about different types of autism, so autisms. And so there's a whole huge amount of research going into this, but we certainly do know that there is a strong genetic component. There is probably environmental components as well. But what they are, we know much less about. There are certain things that happen in pregnancy and stuff like that can be an issue as well. But one thing we do know about environmental stuff is that it's not vaccinations. So that's really been, and really I think that debate's sort of spread away now. It's a shadow of what it used to be in the year 2000 and so we do know that vaccinations do not cause autism, but there probably are some environmental things that either increase the risk or increase the level of autism. So
we answer that on the site. I think it's a really important part. So if you take, James was talking about being a really sensible parent, and Z saying that she had the feeling. I had the opposite. I was like the dumbest ever young mother, and I'm married to like an equally dumb person. So we were like, he's totally fine. He doesn't talk because he's like a genius, because he's like related to us. So, we were the denial parents. But so what we've tried to do on the site as well is talk to those parents, and not to catch you out in, we're smarter than you, but we dive into what pseudoscience is and what denial is and what you're not looking at them. And it's not like, all children have to develop on a particular trajectory, but we do know that when we get to a certain age, if certain milestones haven't been met, it doesn't mean it's autism, but it does mean a grown-up has to come and have a look. And so we've tried to look at all the different types of parenting experiences, and likewise with Barb and the adults. It's a big difference between being diagnosed as autism at 20 than it is at 60. So you can't just throw the adults into one group any more than you can throw the parents into one group. We had to look at all the different individual, again, to go back to James's point, but all the doors people would come through, and have we answered their questions, and we've tried to do that.
And by doors, does this kind of mean the autism pathway that is one of the links that asks you quite a couple of questions to help you kind of navigate maybe the right information on the site, because the site does have a lot of great information. They've tried to section it off into children and adults, but we all know autism, it is a spectrum in terms of in terms of sort of different supports that people need. So by answering a bit of a short questionnaire, you can get put into the right direction of the information that's on this site. Yep. I wanted to go into some of the supports. So can we sort of just talk through, any of you, some examples of the types of supports people living with autism might need throughout their lives, both sort of children and adults?
Oh, well, I can kick it off from children and let Barb answer the adults. I think what's really you know, what we know is that if children have a developmental delay, whether it be autism or not, we need to be able to teach them those skills to help them to be as independent as possible. And that's the goal. And I, you know, looking back at the Nicole in 1999 and looking at the one now who has a big hunking adult wondering why we are not having dinner because Hireup have got a webinar on at 7 o'clock. I can look at an adult and say, every single thing that you do as a parent of a young child to help your child be as independent as possible will lead them to be as happy as possible. And that's all you ever want to do. So there's supports, obviously, in early childhood. There's support through school, which can be really difficult. High school, which can be, oh my God, and then right up to, and I'll let Barb talk to it about the kinds of supports. The supports will be different for everybody at different time and in different families. So what we've tried to do in the child section is give you the evidence that we know now. These are the things most likely. This is the thing that research tells us is the best use of your time. These are nice to haves, and these are stay away froms. Whereas when it came to how we best support adults with autism, I know it sounds silly because I've told you all my son's 25, but I'm kind of clueless. I knew how to support him as a young child, but this is a completely different stage in life. So that's why we needed to bring Barb and the team in of people who were diagnosed later in life to tell us what that experience was, because we just didn't have that first-hand experience. So Barb, you have a chat about the supports.
Yeah, it's support-wise. Well, one of them I always quite often advocate, and it is self-advocating and self-determination. Now, this is something I look at in the terms of the whole lifespan. This starts from childhood all the way through until you fall off the perch. So if you live to 150, you'll still need it, because it's something, and it's a skill that is essential for us to be able to, in self-determination, knowing about ourselves, knowing about what our support needs are, and then being able to self-advocate this and ask for support. So this is really, really essential. So we need to have these things like the NDIS and stuff like that to be able to have people support autistic people in learning how to gain these skills, no matter what age they are, so they can be, in some respect, become more independent in what they want to do with their lives and getting that support. So this is where it comes through with the Autism What Next website. There is lots of information on there to help you, guide you through these particular supports. And other things too, like for me, because I was diagnosed midlife, and from other literature and things I've published, I've very much looked at autistic women. What happens when you get to that point, when you get a diagnosis? What support do you need then? It's a case of, well, we've gone through a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of trauma that comes with this as well, because of trying to do things that doesn't suit that person. So there's that support about, what do I look at in my life? How do I change my life that supports me? I may not know, and I've had sensory issues, so I may need to look about changing my environment. I may have been working in a workplace that didn't support me. I may need to change that as well. I may be in relationships that don't also work for me as well. So all of these different things are incredibly important to reevaluate and look at when you get older, because, you know, life is not over when you get a midlife diagnosis. This is a really good opportunity to go, stuff everyone else. I'm tired of fitting in with what you want. I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to have my life and have the best of it for the rest of my life. And so this is really good. And this is what I find with the Autism What Next site is, specifically around adults, there's an opportunity to look at this information, learn about yourself, whether you go through that diagnosis or not, send you on a pathway of learning about what is going to work for you and making your life so much more worthwhile and happy, and give you that quality of life. This is so important that we want. And that this is what I've loved about what Nick has done in bringing us together. So it's such a huge, important thing that we've needed for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of advocating for yourself, I know that we've done quite a lot of different events on sort of navigating through the NDIS, navigating sort of an autism diagnosis. And the thing that consistently comes up that many of our speakers say, particularly when, you know, you are in a world where you're, you know, not sure, is it's finding the right information, but being able to advocate for it, because sometimes when you go to that GP or you go to that person and they sort of say no, that confidence in yourself to say, well, actually, no, I need to really look more into this is difficult. So the more that we're actually talking about this, I think definitely the better. Poppy's just written in the chat, I'll just read it out. I had a fairly reputable and very well-known pediatric psychologist who charges quite a hefty amount, advised me that my 6.5-year-old son had ASD too, but was adamant he did not have ADD, citing an extreme example of ADD in his assessment. Thankfully, his amazing neurodevelopmental pediatrician assured me, as I had felt, my now 8.5-year-old son does have ASD2 and ADD. Even the experts can get it wrong. It always get a second opinion. So that's quite interesting. And as we've sort of said, yeah, if you have that inner sort of feeling, or I think Z called it a motherly instinct, and so did Nicole, like, yeah, definitely continue to advocate and continue to find that info. I also just want to remind everyone, if you do have a question, please feel free to write it in the chat, or if you want to ask it, we're very happy for you to do that as well. You can unmute yourself and I can come to you. I wanted to sort of ask James, you mentioned in your bio the trip you took with your son Sam. That must have been obviously a super special trip. How was that experience, and did that trip help Sam better develop his own life skills?
Well, it did, and I think it gets back to what Nicole was saying about that. That's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to get independence here. We're trying to have whether it's a child or an adult, to have a full a life as possible. So the whole idea of that was for me to expose Sam to uncertainty and change, and getting him more worldly, if you like, to be able to deal with these different sort of things. So I think that when we were talking about resources before, everyone's going to have different sorts of resources. And sometimes people think about resources very narrowly, like, speech therapists and occupational therapists. But it's actually a lot more than that. It's about maybe relationships, or it might be about social skills, or it might be about how able to handle money. It might be about, being able to cook, anything. It could be sensory stuff, and it absolutely, like the person was saying in that comment about the ADD co-diagnosis, it could be about medical stuff, because a lot of the stuff that affects people on the spectrum is actually co-diagnoses. It can often be much more significant in terms of its effect on you than the actual autism diagnosis. And co-diagnoses are really common in autism, particularly things like anxiety and ADD/ADHD. But there's lots of other ones. So I think that's why what resources this individual needs, sometimes you need to really think really broadly. And with Sam, it was more about, I want him to be as independent as possible, and this is the way I think I'm going to be able to achieve.
Amazing. I wanted to, again, just remind everyone, if you wanted to ask a question, feel free to do so in the chat. I wanted to also ask, in terms of kind of allowing autism to be more known to not just the people that are sort of going through it, but just mainstream. I don't know if it's a bit of a random question, but sort of shows like, I don't know if you've heard of sort of Atypical and stuff like that. I've watched it and I do absolutely love it. But do those shows sort of help or hinder this kind of issue? Do you feel like they actually do sort of help people better understand autism, especially because someone with autism doesn't necessarily just have to have other people in their life with autism? It's sort of about being part of the mainstream.
That's
Nicole, do you want to say something?
Well, it's a really good question, and I'm wondering whether Barb and I have really different answers, because we haven't discussed this. Actually, it hasn't come up before. So look, I'm going to say it depends. I think Atypical was possibly one of the better ones. Obviously, Autism Awareness was involved with Love on the Spectrum. There are some that I think, autism awareness as a concept is kind of, how do you ever wrap a bow around that? Like, it's a really hard thing to say. I think autism awareness is so much better than when it was when my son was diagnosed. But then I'm constantly surprised when I meet people who are clueless and go, oh my God, what rock have you been under? But so look, we do our best. We constantly try and raise awareness on all sorts of mediums so people understand it. There are some that I think are less helpful in terms of the good doctor, everybody assuming that your kid with autism is going to be an amazing surgeon. But the flip side to it says to me, well, we've still got people talking about autism and it's still raising. So look, some of them are misrepresentations, some of them are exaggerations. I don't think there's a hard and fast yes or no. But what I do know is, well, certainly from our point of view as an organisation, we get called a lot more with productions that are wanting to include an autism storyline or an autism character. And I think the more that we see people with autism, particularly if we're doing a good job of not misrepresenting it or over exploiting that type of autism, I think that's good. But I don't know, Barb, tell me, am I wrong?
No, I actually agree with you, Nick, and it's interesting, we have not talked about this before. Personally, I don't watch them because I find it very challenging, because I feel like they're over-exaggerated in a lot of context. And as you said, like with the Good Doctor and stuff like that, autism is very diverse. We have this misconception that it's, as I said before, a male condition. We're in IT, we're savants. It's not. It's a very colourful world. This is hence why it's called a spectrum as well. The portrayals can be sometimes misleading in what people's perceptions may be. I think if we're going to bring in into, you know, media and stuff like that, you know, as in, you know, series and things like that, maybe not have it stand out so much so it's so emphasized. Have it in a naturalistic sort of environment that these sort of things happen. I'm really struggling to find something that stands out for me. The only thing I can think of, and interestingly, this came on late at night and I really wanted to watch a repeat episode from many years ago, and it doesn't even depict that he is autistic or hinted that way, is House. So if you can remember from that medic, I used to love that because he was very challenging and he was very abrupt to everybody. And I don't, you know, everybody's wrong. I know what I'm doing. But you would never sort of like think of it that way. These days you may do. But I'm not a great fan of them because I think it still separates us. And I don't like that. You know, I'm very much for inclusion, not integration, not, hey, look, there's something special about, there's something different about them. It's like, we all have different things. We all look at the world differently. We view the world differently. And this is not just about autistic people. This is about everybody. We all have our own experiences. So I don't feel we need to stand out. I just feel we need to be accepted in differences in things that we do.
But the flip side of that is I got asked a really interesting question on Q&A a few months ago. They let me on Q&A. Don't know why, but I behaved really well and I didn't swear. But there was a question somebody asked about the Sia drama. I don't know if anyone knows the Sia drama, but Sia did a movie that I didn't actually see it. And I have been told by Nicole Hurley, who's up the top there watching us, my colleague who helped with Autism What Next, I'm told it was actually a terrible movie, but that had nothing to do with the autism subplot. But obviously Sia makes a movie, and the movie is about a woman with autism, and the actor playing the character didn't have autism. Yes. So all of a sudden that became a big meltdown in the autism world. And I have a lot of dear friends in the film world who were so perplexed and worried, not related to the film, but were so worried, oh my God, Nicole, has the film industry offended the autism community? And to their point, cowboys aren't cowboys, you know, they're acting. And, you know, people have always acted. That's the very nature of being an actor. But it does show you that in this world of representation, and it's broader than autism, I know, but there are politics involved. You got to be really careful. You're always going to offend somebody on Twitter or Facebook. That's the place to go. But I think the one thing we had around Autism What Next is we built a bit of a safe space in the collaborators and in the workshops we had. And we kind of, you know, part of that co-design was somebody's going to offend somebody and you're going to totally say the wrong thing. And just nobody means to do that here. That's not what we're here for. We're here to get an outcome, to make as many people feel, I call it like being caught. You know, when something happens to you and you feel like there's a saying that the carpet gets ripped out from underneath you and you're falling. And I wanted Autism What Next to be the thing that caught people. And just stood them back up on their legs and said, you'll be right, come on, mate, off we go towards this positive place. So I think we needed as collaborators to find a place that said, you know what, let's dial down the offence and let's dial up the understanding and see whether or not we can land in a very sensible outcome that will benefit as many people in the community as we can.
Absolutely. And actually a good little segue to that, Z writes, issues that I find many parents struggle with are concerns, you know, of others labeling the child or their child or, you know, that person, as there are many stigmas that need to be broken within many cultures and communities. And again, whether or not mainstream sort of inclusion in whatever way that looks like in film and TV and even books. I know the Rose, I don't know if you've read the Rosie Project. I actually loved that book so much. I don't know if, again, that's very representative, but again, it just helps someone that hasn't maybe had as much experience with autism, just to better understand, you know, how it can affect, or, you know, how that comes out in certain people. So anyway, it was quite interesting.
But it's good to understand other people's autism as well. And I think that's been the absolute, the wonder I've found over the last couple of years of doing this project, is I understand my autism, I understand Jack's autism, I understand it in the Rogerson household, and actually I understand it in the Best household because they've been my friends for years. I understand different types of autism, but it was an absolute luxury and pleasure to meet so many people of so many different cultures, backgrounds, ages, who explained to me what their autism was. And you know what, guess what? For every time someone's going to tell you it's a different experience, there's an awful lot of crossover in what we experience. It might be a slightly different story, but man, there's so much more that brings us together as a community in our experiences, that what separates us.
Absolutely. Now, Poppy asks a question: how do you know if you are doing enough as a parent to support your high functioning, and she puts in brackets, sorry to use this term, ASD child with their development? What are some good and sound measures? Behaviour in school, behaviour in society, making friends, physical and psychological development. Who wants to answer that?
I think it's interesting that she asked, how do you know you're doing enough?
Yeah.
Look, you're trying. And I have this conversation with patients all the time. You know, the anxiety of am I doing enough is, and if you're asking that question, you are, okay, because you're trying and you're reflecting on it. And so I think that, you know, just whether you're an individual, like an adult with autism, or whether you're a parent of a child with autism, you know, if you're trying to push yourself along, if you're trying to get yourself more independent and get more out of life, then you are doing enough. You're doing your best. And so you know, you've got to give yourself a bit of space and support as well. So I think that it can be, people can have a lot of weight on their shoulders. And so I think that you need to understand that you're the resource. You're the one who's helping guide this child, or maybe you're the one who's trying to help yourself as an individual. And I think, as I see with my son, you know, he's the one that tries hardest, actually. And so I think that to answer that question, I think it really is the fact that you're making that effort already, and think questioning it. I think it sort of shows that you are.
Poppy says, huge thanks, James. Phew, with an emoji.
I have to actually agree with James exactly. If you're asking that question, you're definitely doing enough. It shows the amount of compassion and concern that you have for your child when you ask these sort of things. It's 100% you're doing enough. Also, you want to ask yourself too, are you doing enough for yourself too? So don't forget to look after yourself so you can also look after your child well too. Because quite often many parents, I know from my own clinical work, is lots of energy goes into looking after them and doing the best for them, but they need to also look at themselves as well and getting that support too. So that's super important. And Nick would definitely know and explain about that a lot more from her own personal experience too.
Well, I'm going to slightly disagree. Well, I'm not going to disagree. We're both completely right. I'm just going to add another element in there from my personal experience. And I don't know, but for me, being able to, every time Jack learnt a skill that he didn't have the day before was like the best day of my life. I've had a few 100,000 of the best days of my life, because every time he does something, to this day, I love it when he thinks I'm a fucking idiot, to be honest, because that's developmentally appropriate, and I am. So I have found that take this little guy who couldn't talk and communicate to now, I don't know, I ran into him last Saturday night coming back from the pub with friends. I have had the best parenting experience. I am so rich in happiness of all those fantastic days I had. And yeah, there were some shitty ones, but watching your child develop, and they will, whether you like it or not, whether you work at it 1 hour a day, 10 minutes a day, or 10 hours a day, watching that development, sitting back and looking at those old photos and seeing how far you've come, I found that an absolute drug level high. So yes, the effort is a lot. Yes, you have to take care of yourself, but also dig in. That's the good stuff. Teaching your kid how to do something they couldn't do yesterday was my drug of choice.
Amazing. We have 10 minutes or 9 minutes left. Feel free, any last questions, to put them in the chat. I maybe might want to ask, and I might also share the website just for people to be able to see, because I wanted to sort of show the video just about the intro into it, which sometimes can give it a bit of an all-encompassing, but maybe I'll show that. And when I come back, would love to just get from all the panel members, maybe sort of top 2 takeaways for people on this call navigating a first diagnosis. Poppy did ask, maybe we'll answer this. What's next for autism? What's next? I feel like maybe that's more a comment or a funny question, but while they think about their answer, I might just share the website just so you can really have a look at how it's actually laid out. It's pretty amazing in terms of, there's that autism pathway, which you can answer your questionnaire, autism in children and autism in adults. And when you click those, you get quite a lot of really great resources, including lots of videos, which I think is really, it's multimedia. So it's not just loads and loads and loads of content. It's a lot of videos. It's a lot of experience filmed from many different people who were part of this community. So I might just quickly play this video just to give you that background, if that's okay.
If you're new to autism, we know it can be daunting at first, but you're not alone. We are here to help. Welcome to Autism What Next, an online toolkit designed to help you navigate your autism journey. Created by autistic people and their families, with support and guidance from some of Australia's leading clinical experts. With the best information, resources and advice available, Autism What Next will empower you to support yourself or your loved one on the autism spectrum. This site is all about lived experience, where you can listen to parents describing the journey through diagnosis and autistic adults recalling what worked for them. We are here to support and guide you. So let us help you navigate autism. Autism, what next?
So I'll just give one other, you can get started. So there's a lot of different topics and it's really well laid out. When you click into these topics, there's, video, again, it's multimedia, which is really great. So I might just sort of then throw it back to the speakers, sort of 2 key takeaways.
Well, no, I was going to ask,
okay.
special award goes to somebody who recognised the voiceover. So we were really, really grateful to have him be part of this project, and it was lovely. We actually thought we were going to get lots of people on video and they were all going to say really fantastic things and it was going to make this amazing video, and then we realised we actually needed a professional to help. So it was nice to have Michael Caton in to be part of that. But I think one thing that I should let everybody know, and it's really important, it goes a little bit to the Autism What Next. The greatest part about Autism What Next is a digital platform. So we can change it every day, every week, every month. So as new information comes to hand, as better supports come to hand, we will be updating that so it is relevant to people now and in 10 years and in 20 years. The one thing we did do, again, shout out to Nicole Hurley, who's one of the visitors here tonight. Wave, Nicole. We took our little video in the middle of COVID and travelled across Australia. Whenever a border went down, we were crossing it, and felt a little bit Sound of Music, and we were videotaping. We have just done hours and hours and hours. There are 65 videos on this of all lived experience and clinical experience of autism. They're not even all there. We could only get 90% of them there for launch. We've got another 10 coming this week. It's just that it's dripping with stories, and if you're somebody that wants to come on and read, come and do that. But if you're somebody that wants to listen and hear from people who have gone before you, and Barb and her colleagues who do this amazing job of explaining what it was like for them, then it's there for you. You don't have to come and have one visit. Come and dip your toe in, come again a week later, come a month later. It's there to help you get through to the point that you don't need it anymore.
Amazing. Now, Z, you do have your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
So this is a little bit awkward. Someone direct messaged me and I'm not on the panel with a question.
Right, okay.
But, I'm actually curious to know as well. So they're asking, how can we contact James? His details on the website.
Oh.
You have to travel to Nowra. I'm happy for my details to be shared with anybody. But you can Google me. I'm a GP in Nowra in New South Wales. and send a message to my practice if you want.
But were they looking for a good one?
I've got good ones that work with me.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Got it.
Oh,
Best.
Narelle, it's Narelle who's asked. So Dr. James Best, you can Google him. There we go. I'll put that in there.
I suppose you faked your last name. Your last name isn't Best. It just sounds like I'm
Terrible
Dr.
surname.
Best. It's like a marketing thing, I'm sure.
Can I say my two things?
Yes, please.
I think it's about difference and disability, which is a debate that rages at the moment in the autism world. Is it difference? Is it a disability? Is it both? My feeling is that it can be either or both. And I think that with the difference thing, that it's about respect. This is certainly from my journey as a parent. That I'm really proud of what Sam is and how he is, and so's he actually. So the disability stuff, the stuff not being able to do stuff, and you need to be independent and all that sort of thing, I think that's really important too, and you need to address that. But I think you need to keep both things in mind, and I think that that's what this website does.
Amazing. And Barb, did you want to finish it off with any top tips?
I get to have the last word. Sorry, Nick. Following on what James says, this platform brings together everybody. This is not a site just for parents. It's not a site just for children. It's not a site just for adults, and it's not a site just for women or men. It's a site for everybody. This website has so much information, and it's incredible, and it's actually going to bring people together because of the experiences that have been shared through this. And I have been actually very grateful to be involved in this, because it has been such an opportunity to be able to, in some sense, bridge that little bit of a divide of this is how it is in childhood, this is how it is in adulthood, and to be able to have that sort of blend that goes through life. You can look at it at any age, and that information will be there on that website. There will be an experience. There will be information to help you on your way. There will be resources and links and everything that you may possibly need. And as Nick said, it's always going to be updated and reviewed, and also as research changes and evolves, and as we learn more things. So this is something so incredible what came out of this. So that is something that's incredibly important, and so very proud to be part of, and very grateful from that respect. So yeah, it's probably like multiple different things involved into that as takeaway, but that for me is what has made it so important about this website, especially from an adult perspective, because we have been missing out there in the dark for a long time, and it's like, hey, we actually have a voice on a platform, and we're all together in this.
Absolutely. Beautiful last words, and we are right on time. I want to just thank our amazing panel tonight, Nicole, Barb and James, for taking the time out of your busy schedules, especially sort of after hours. We really appreciate that. I just want to remind everyone as well that we do have a part 2 of this next week, and it's very much around autism and the NDIS, because that is almost like an hour in itself just to unpack a lot of that. And we have Barb coming on again, and also Nicole Hurley, who's in the audience, who's also part of Autism Awareness Australia, and Sally Codington, who's part of DSC. So that's next week on the 17th. We will be sending out the info pack, the resources, James's contact details, maybe not that, but we will definitely send all the information to you after this, so you can navigate that website. We also did put it in the chat tonight if you wanted to check it out. But anyway, from everyone at Hireup, and again, thank you, Nicole, Barb and James, for your time, and thank you for everyone here for listening tonight.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night. Bye.